It was one of those nights when the city felt alive, but not in a comforting way. The rain had turned the streets into slick mirrors of neon, reflecting red, blue, and green in fragmented patterns that made everything feel distorted, almost unreal. She had been walking home, hands deep in her coat pockets, mind wandering through the monotony of her day, when a sound cut through the night, a sharp cry that made her stop mid-step. Instinct took over before thought could weigh in. Down a narrow alley, shadowed and dark, she saw her. A woman, cornered and trembling, struggling against two figures who moved with cruel precision. The attacker's hands were fast, unyielding, and the woman's eyes were wide with panic, pleading silently for someone to intervene. She didn't pause. She ran. The rain slapped her face, mixing with adrenaline and fear, and she felt every heartbeat hammering against her ribs like a warning drum. Her fists clenched, and her voice, fierce and unwavering, cut through the chaos, demanding the attacker stop. It was terrifying, stepping into danger without knowing the outcome, yet there was no hesitation. The stranger's life, vulnerable and raw, demanded courage she didn't know she possessed until this moment. When she reached them, the world seemed to narrow down to the fight itself. The strangers, caught off guard by her sudden intervention, faltered, giving her enough space to push the woman away, to create a barrier between the danger and her trembling, soaked body. The woman's eyes met hers, and in them was something that made her chest ache, a mixture of shock, relief, and a gratitude so deep it felt almost physical. In that fleeting moment, there were no words, only understanding. Lives had collided, two strangers drawn together by the sheer randomness of circumstance, and something unspoken had passed between them. Once the attackers fled, the city felt quieter, though the rain continued to drum against the pavement like a soft applause for what had just occurred. The woman she had saved leaned against the wall, shivering, hair plastered to her face, and she reached out instinctively. Their hands brushed, and she felt a spark, not one born of fantasy, but of raw human connection, fragile and undeniable. She offered her coat, and the woman's lips trembled into a small, grateful smile. It wasn't just about warmth, it was about safety, recognition, and the sudden, inexplicable feeling that perhaps the world wasn't entirely cruel. Neither spoke for a long moment, just breathing in the shared reality of having faced danger together. There was fear, yes, but there was also exhilaration, a strange thrill that comes from risking everything for another person, and perhaps discovering, in that risk, the first faint stirrings of something more profound. Something neither had anticipated. And as they walked out of the alley together, wet and cold but alive, there was a quiet promise in the air. She followed her without thinking, her heartbeat still hammering in her chest from the chaos of the night. The streets were quiet now, shadows stretching long under the dim glow of the streetlights. Every step felt surreal, as though she were walking through a dream she wasn't sure she wanted to wake up from. The stranger moved with an air of quiet command, but it was subtle, almost effortless, the kind of presence that drew your eyes without demanding them. And when the hero finally stepped inside the mansion, she realized the world she had known was nothing compared to this. The doors closed behind her with a soft thud, and the chill of the night was replaced by warmth and the faint scent of expensive leather and polished wood. Her eyes swept over the opulence around her, marble floors, gilded accents, crystal chandeliers casting soft prisms of light, and paintings that seemed to watch her with knowing eyes. But it wasn't just the grandeur that caught her off guard, it was the way the stranger moved through it, effortlessly inhabiting a space that seemed too large for one person, yet somehow perfectly hers. Then she saw them, a room filled with figures who exuded power and danger, men and women whose expressions shifted subtly at the stranger's presence. She spoke a single word, casually, almost playfully, and the room stilled. Orders were given, questions answered, and every word carried weight. The hero felt it then, a cold shiver of awe and fear mingled with disbelief. This wasn't just someone who had survived the streets, this was someone who ruled them, someone who had built empires of influence and intimidation. The realization hit her like a wave. She was standing in the presence of a feared Mafia Queen, a woman whose life had been forged in shadows and gold, danger and loyalty. Their eyes met, and the air between them shifted. It was electric, charged with something she couldn't quite name: curiosity, tension, maybe even something more intimate that made her stomach tighten. She tried to speak, tried to understand the whirlwind she had been pulled into, but words failed her. In that instant, she saw layers she hadn't anticipated, a vulnerability hidden beneath the commanding exterior, a fleeting softness in the eyes that contrasted with the ruthless power displayed moments ago. It was terrifying and magnetic all at once. The stranger tilted her head slightly, studying her, and the hero felt exposed, naked in her honesty and confusion. And yet, there was a strange comfort in being seen, truly seen, by someone who had mastered the art of masks and walls. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to breathe, to let curiosity bloom alongside fear. There was so much she didn't know, so much danger and intrigue waiting in the spaces between them, but for the first time, she didn't care. She had stepped into another world, a world of power, beauty, and secrets, and she didn't want to leave. The room smelled faintly of roses and old leather, a strange combination that felt both intimate and charged. The hero stepped inside hesitantly, her heart hammering in her chest, unsure if she was ready for the confrontation she knew awaited her. The Mafia Queen was already there, reclining against the chaise lounge with that effortless air of command that always unnerved her. But tonight, something in her eyes was different, softer, almost fragile, and it made the hero's breath catch. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two worlds colliding in a silent storm. The air between them was heavy, almost tangible, a mix of fear and fascination that neither dared break. The hero could feel the pull, magnetic and undeniable, yet terrifying in its intensity. She took a cautious step closer, and the queen didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head, studying her with an almost tender curiosity that made the hero question everything she thought she knew about this enigmatic woman. "You don't have to stay," the queen said softly, her voice stripped of all the arrogance and menace it usually carried. "You could leave. Walk away, and I'd never stop you." The hero swallowed hard, words lodged somewhere between her heart and her throat. "And if I don't?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her attempt at composure. A small, almost imperceptible smile curved the queen's lips. "Then, we'll just sit here. Talk. Maybe figure out why we can't stop thinking about each other." Her fingers brushed against the armrest, dangerously close to the hero's hand. The contact was accidental, or maybe not, but it sent a shiver racing up her spine. They spoke, haltingly at first, peeling back layers they had spent months hiding. Confessions spilled out, some light, some heavy, all laden with the kind of vulnerability that only comes when two people are terrified of losing each other but are drawn too deeply to turn away. The hero realized that behind the queen's power, her fear, and her dangerous allure, there was someone achingly human, someone who had been waiting for a connection just as much as she had. Their hands finally met, fingers intertwining with a delicate, hesitant certainty. No words were needed, the silence was eloquent, speaking of desire, hesitation, and a fragile trust that neither had offered anyone before. The queen's gaze softened, dark eyes reflecting the golden glow of the room, and the hero felt something inside her break open, letting in warmth she didn't realize she had been starving for. Time seemed to suspend itself in that moment, the world outside irrelevant. They existed only in each other's presence, where fear mingled with fascination, attraction with uncertainty, and vulnerability with longing. Every glance, every subtle touch, whispered of promises unspoken, of hearts daring to hope in a world that offered no safety, only intensity. The dawn was soft, painting the streets with a golden hue that felt almost unreal. She stood outside the mansion, her heart hammering like a wild drum, every beat echoing the choice she now faced. The world seemed suspended, the city holding its breath, as if waiting for her to step forward or turn away. She felt the chill of the morning air, but it did nothing to cool the fire coursing through her veins. Her reflection shimmered in the tinted glass of a sleek black car parked nearby, and for the first time, she truly saw herself, not just the woman everyone else thought they knew, but the one who had been quietly searching for courage, for desire, for a truth she had never dared to speak. Every step toward the mansion whispered promises of power, danger, and an intoxicating thrill she had only glimpsed from afar. It was a world painted in shadows and whispers, a life that demanded loyalty, wit, and fearlessness. And yet, it called to her in a way that nothing else ever had. She felt a strange thrill at the thought of stepping into that world, not as a bystander, not as someone hiding in the corners of life, but as the force who could command it, shape it, even love within it. And then there was the other path, the one that led away from it all. The one lined with safety, familiarity, the quiet comfort of what she knew. It promised peace, yes, but also a life muted, predictable, and painfully ordinary. She remembered the faces she would leave behind, the dreams that might fade, the small warmth of a life untouched by chaos. Could she forsake that, even for a chance at a passion she had never known she could feel so intensely? Her thoughts drifted to the woman who had become more than a shadow in her life. She thought of the glances, the words left unsaid, the moments that had turned into silent confessions. The desire she had tried to ignore now roared within her, raw and undeniable. It was a love born in danger, nurtured in secrecy, and tested by fear. And yet, it was love that demanded courage. Love that asked her to step into the unknown, love that refused to be denied. As the sun climbed higher, the golden light spilling across the streets, she felt herself transform. Fear and desire intertwined, creating a pulse she could not resist. The reflection in the car window seemed almost alive, a mirror showing her the woman she could become, fierce, unyielding, unapologetically herself. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the decision settle into her chest, no longer a burden but a call to action. And then she moved, her steps deliberate, unflinching, each one carrying her closer to the life that awaited. The mansion loomed ahead, a symbol of the danger and exhilaration she had chosen. Her heart raced, but it was no longer fear, it was the thrill of embracing everything she had ever wanted. The courage to follow desire into the unknown, the awakening of a love that could survive anything.